Elias Trent never imagined a single text could unravel everything he thought he knew. The message arrived just as he was closing his laptop in the warm glow of his downtown Seattle kitchen. Granite countertops reflected the early evening light, and a faint scent of jasmine from the diffuser filled the air. He tapped the notification, a single sentence that felt as if it had been carved into his mind with a surgeon's scalpel. "I'm leaving you for my boss. He's everything you're not." Signed, Chloe Sinclair. At 45, Elias had devoted 15 years to building his reputation as a financial advisor at Meridian Wealth, a boutique firm perched on the 23rd floor of the Cascade Tower. He specialized in crafting bespoke portfolios for tech executives and entrepreneurs, work quiet enough to blend into the background of his own life. While his colleagues fired off rapid-fire emails and donned tailored suits for PowerPoint battles, Elias preferred the solitude of spreadsheets and the steady ritual of morning coffee in his home office. But solitude turned to stunned silence as he reread Chloe's words. He set down his cup and closed his eyes, feeling the weight of betrayal settle like a stone in his chest. He typed, almost mechanically, "Understood. Take care of yourself." No anger, no pleading, just a line as cool and measured as the spreadsheets he loved. He placed his phone face down on the counter, then reached across the room to boot his laptop. As the Meridian Wealth portal loaded, he fought the urge to flinch. There it was. A pending transfer of $212 from their Pacific Horizon fund, what he had always thought of as their lifeline for the future they had planned together. The status read, "Awaiting my approval." Elias's mind drifted back 6 months. He remembered noticing the first discrepancies: weekend retreats that never appeared on Chloe's corporate schedule, unexplained dinner tabs at waterfront bistros when she claimed to be out of state, and an 11:03 p.m. missed call from Adrienne Maddox, her regional director, on a Tuesday she insisted she spent finalizing proposals. He noticed patterns the way a sommelier discerns subtle notes in a vintage wine. And each detail left a bitter aftertaste in his thoughts. In a surge of foresight, he had quietly restructured their finances. He created a modest joint account for everyday expenses but funneled the real capital, nearly $870, into the Trent Family Trust, a vehicle in his name alone. Chloe had signed the paperwork in a blur of end-of-year deadlines, hardly glancing at the fine print as she juggled conference calls and cocktails with investors. Now, sitting in his kitchen, Elias felt neither triumph nor vengeance, just a clinical sense of inevitability. Weeks earlier, he had inserted a dual authentication requirement for any withdrawal over $10,000. Imagining it as a sensible precaution, he watched the clock tick 9:14 p.m. There was no way Chloe could bypass the extra step. 17 years ago, they met at an investment forum in San Francisco. Chloe had dazzled the room in a crisp suit and a voice that brokered deals like a maestro conducting an orchestra. She represented Nova Cure Solutions, a rising star in the pharmaceutical world, and her confidence was magnetic. Elias, on the other hand, had been quietly recruiting high-net-worth clients for Meridian's Seattle branch. Armed with nothing more flashy than a binder of past performance charts and a habit of listening more than he spoke, they fell into an unlikely harmony. Her ambition complemented his caution, her sociability balanced his reserve. 2 years later they married under towering redwoods in Northern California, pledging to cultivate a life of weekend hikes through Mount Tamalpais, elegant dinner parties in their Capitol Hill abode, and children arriving by year 5. Yet those plans unraveled with a sterile pronouncement from a fertility specialist. Elias's sperm count was too low for natural conception. He held Chloe's hand in that bright medical office and promised alternative paths, adoption, surrogacy, but life grew busy, and they never pursued them. Instead, Chloe dove headlong into climbing the corporate ladder, quarterly summits in Boston, gala fundraisers in New York, client dinners under the soft glow of Venetian chandeliers. Elias expanded his client roster, his calendar filled with portfolio reviews and morning client calls. Their home became a revolving door of packed suitcases and lingering good nights, rarely shared beneath the same roof. The first real fracture came 3 years ago. For their 20th anniversary, Elias planned a weekend at Sun Valley, Idaho, a rustic chalet with panoramic mountain views. He imagined them sipping hot toddies by a crackling fireplace, When he broached the subject, Chloe's eyes flicked to her phone. "I can't, Elias. I'm committed to an executive retreat with Adrian's team that same weekend." He duplicated her calendar event, leadership offsite, professional growth seminar. He went alone, wandering snow-dusted trails with only the echo of memories for company. Hearing laughter over the phone later that night turned a crack into a chasm. After that, separate vacations became the norm. Conversations dwindled to updates on mortgage payments and utility bills, intimacy perfunctory. As if it were yet another task to check off. And then Adrian Maddox ascended to regional director. Suddenly, Chloe championed every one of his projects. "He values my perspective," she'd text. "He sees my untapped potential." Her phone was no longer an auxiliary device but a secret vault. Face down at the dinner table. Tucked beneath her textbook at business lunches. Locked behind a password. He had seen these signs in others' failing marriages. But never in his own. Elias never confronted her. He documented everything in painstaking detail. Dates of mystery reservations at boutique hotels. Charges in cities that didn't match her itinerary. Credit card statements showing late-night expenses. When he caught her email open one morning, revealing a 2-night stay in an ocean view suite under both her name and Adrian's, he said nothing. Instead, he adjusted his strategy. Sitting in the home office the next dawn, he stared at the $212 withdrawal blinking on his screen. Approve or deny. Each click held the power to reshape the rest of their lives. He did neither. He reached for the leather-bound folder he'd assembled months earlier, trust documents. Amended account ledgers, notarized service agreements. He slid them out of the top drawer of his desk. The paper whispering like a library of hidden truths. The doorbell chimed. Elias closed the laptop and smoothed his blazer over his button-down shirt before opening the door. There stood Lena Parker, Chloe's closest confidant and fellow NovaCure strategist. Her shoulders were tense under a tailored coat, her eyes downcast. "May I come in?" she asked. Voice low. He stepped aside. In the kitchen, the overhead light cast a spotlight on her unease. He poured 2 coffees, though neither would be tasted. "She asked me to retrieve some things," Lena said, voice breaking. "Chloe's not coming back, Elias. She's asked for her jewelry and her winter wardrobe." He regarded the espresso machine for a moment, then nodded toward a small safe tucked beneath the counter. "It's in there. You know the code." Lena bit her lip, fingers curling around the strap of her handbag. "Thank you," she whispered. She retrieved a velvet-lined box of delicate necklaces and a stack of cashmere sweaters. As she turned to leave, she paused, eyes flicking back to the kitchen island. "Did the transfer go through?" she asked. He tapped the laptop's touchpad to wake it. "Still pending," he said, voice even. "Dual authorization is required." Her breath hitched. "She'll be furious." "Her choice," Elias replied. Lena slipped out into the Seattle drizzle, leaving him alone with the low hum of the refrigerator. For a moment, he felt the strange clarity of a man who had anticipated the storm and built a shelter. He drove to Meridian Wealth the following morning, the familiar ritual of client service feeling hollow. At lunchtime, he walked to his bank and initiated phase 2 of his plan. By mid-afternoon, his phone displayed 7 missed calls from Chloe, each one starker than the last. He ignored them. Instead, he made his way to the office of Robert Langston, his attorney and longtime friend. They met in a conference room overlooking Elliott Bay. Robert flipped through the folder Elias handed him. Account statements, credit card charges, hotel confirmations, the pending withdrawal alert. "This is more than sufficient," Robert said, sliding the papers into his briefcase. "We'll file for financial misconduct and abandonment tomorrow. Washington state doesn't require proof of fault. But these will strengthen your case." Elias felt a hollow calm wash over him. This wasn't about revenge, he told himself. It was about principles, transactions and consequences. An equation he understood better than any human emotion. 3 days passed in quiet routine. The world outside moved as always, conferences, conference calls, coffee breaks. Chloe's messages turned desperate, then pleading. He didn't respond. On the 4th day, he returned to their shared townhouse and found the front door ajar. Chloe stood in the entryway, makeup smudged and hair limp from the rain. She held her phone up like a challenge. "What did you do?" she demanded, voice unsteady. He set his briefcase on the console. "You think the money's gone?" he said. She thrust the screen at him. "Transfer approved. It went through last night. Fix it, now." He leaned back, folding his hands. "Transfer denied," he said quietly. Her jaw went slack. "But dual authorization," he reminded her. "Our agreement. You signed it." Chloe's eyes darted around the room. He could see panic flicker behind her eyes. He walked to the kitchen island and poured a glass of water. His reflection pale in the window panes. Handing it to her, he spoke softly. "We need to talk about the divorce." Her face contorted with hurt and fury. "The divorce?" He met her gaze evenly. "I intended to discuss it after you took the money," he replied. Silence swallowed the room. Finally, she whispered, "Half of that money is mine. I earned it. Doesn't Adrian understand that?" He studied her. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "This isn't about him," he said. "It's about trust." "Chloe." She flinched, eyes downcast. Then he added, "And legally binding financial agreements." Her posture shifted. Her voice softened for the first time since it all began. The moment Chloe stormed back into the townhouse, her posture brittle with frustration. I sensed the tension crackling in the air like static. She threw her shoulders back and fixed me with a glare so sharp it could have cut glass. "I was upset," she began, voice trembling with a carefully measured urgency. "I didn't mean to end things like that. We deserve a proper conversation." That sudden pivot to conciliation, the same poised calm she deployed when closing reluctant clients, felt almost rehearsed. This was the fearless Chloe who had once swayed skeptical physicians at Novacure's gala, coaxing them into lucrative partnerships. Now, her high-heeled shoes clicked rapidly across the chestnut floorboards she'd personally overseen installing last autumn. "I've retained counsel already," I told her evenly. "Robert Langston filed the petition yesterday morning." Her eyes narrowed into slits. "You already have an attorney?" "Yes," I replied. "He's handling the divorce paperwork. Your lawyer, Campbell Hughes, is free to contact him." A flush of disbelief flared across Chloe's cheeks. She paced, every step punctuating her rising panic. She grabbed a framed photograph from the mantel, as laughing by the fire in Sun Valley, and hurled it against the wall. The glass spider webbed over my smiling face, shards scattering at her feet. "Adrian was right about you," she hissed between clenched teeth. "You're hopeless, no ambition, no backbone." I stood in the quiet aftermath, staring at my fractured reflection. "I'll need your key back," I said softly. She reached into her leather tote and flung it onto the coffee table. "This isn't over," she warned before stalking out the door. Once the front door clicked shut, I knelt to gather each splinter of glass, careful not to miss a single sliver. When my hands were clean, I poured 2 fingers of bourbon into a crystal tumbler and dialed Robert. She came back. I reported into the phone. Through the picture. Demanded her keys. "Expected," he said with a dry chuckle. "The bank notified her when her transfer was rejected?" "Correct. She's furious. Says she wants full access to our joint assets." "Good luck with that," Robert said. "The Trent family trust remains ironclad." The next morning, an envelope bearing the embossed logo of Harrison and Cole LLP awaited me on my desk at Meridian Wealth. I recognized the firm's downtown Seattle tower from our many gala fundraisers. Inside, a letter from Campbell Hughes demanded the immediate release of all marital assets. It threatened legal action for financial restraint and emotional coercion. I scanned the pages until my gaze landed on the courtesy copy to Adrian Maddox's corporate counsel. Now he was directly involved. That afternoon, Robert filed an amended petition, supplementing it with documentation of Chloe's attempted $212 withdrawal and a request for a temporary restraining order barring her from the property. "Let them think you're weak," he advised, "so they overplay their hand. In financial planning, patience is a strategy." I refused to respond to Campbell's ultimatum, knowing that each aggressive move only fortified my position. 2 weeks later, a text buzzed on my phone. "Coffee? I have information you need. J." Curiosity outweighed caution. At 2 p.m., I sat in the rear corner of the Harborview Cafe, its floor-to-ceiling windows framing a sparkling Elliott Bay. The hum of steam and espresso punctuated the midday lull. 10 minutes past our agreed time, a sharply dressed woman slipped in. Jessica Harlow, Novacure's HR director, her blonde bob perfectly styled. eyes shielded by oversized sunglasses. She sat without ordering, placed a slim thumb drive on the table, and leaned forward. "I can't be seen with you," she murmured. "What is it?" She glanced around the cafe before answering. "Emails between Adrian Maddox and Chloe. Dating back 14 months. I retrieved the drive and slid it into my laptop. Why bring this to me?" Jessica's lips pressed into a thin line. "Adrian's done this before, 3 times. That I know of. He lures married subordinates, promises promotions, then casts them aside." My heart hardened. "And Nova Cure allows this?" "His father sits on the board," Jessica whispered. "But there's more. These emails reference confidential pipeline data, later found in competitor presentations." My breath caught. "Industrial espionage?" She nodded. "Adrian sold proprietary research. He had Chloe retrieve files she shouldn't have accessed." The implications settled over me like a winter frost. Was she complicit? I don't know. The FBI's investigating quietly. Either she was manipulated, or she knew. Jessica stood. "Use this however you need." She departed before I could thank her. I ordered a latte I never drank and copied the files to a secure folder. The messages painted a damning picture. "Once you're free from Trent, we'll relocate you to Miami, director level. Get what you can from his accounts. I'll handle the rest." They had planned to extract Chloe's insider access, and then discard her. And she nearly played along, leveraging my name and expertise until Adrian decided she was expendable. I drove straight to Robert's office. He skimmed the emails, gaze fixed on the rain-spattered skyline beyond his window. "This changes everything," he said. "How so?" I asked. "The espionage angle can trigger federal criminal charges. But you don't want her imprisoned." "No," I said, surprised by the honesty in my own voice. "I just want out." Robert nodded. "We'll use this for leverage. She'll drop her financial claims. Sign the settlement on your terms." "And no FBI leak?" I clarified. "If you prefer," he replied. "Then I'll draft an offer." That evening, Campbell Hughes delivered a settlement proposal. Chloe sought 60% of the assets, the townhouse, and ongoing alimony. I forwarded it to Robert with a single note. Time to play the thumb drive card. By the next morning, Robert sent back our counter-offer. Chloe would relinquish all claims to the Trent Family Trust, accept a one-time payment of $50, and sign a mutual non-disclosure on marital matters and Nova Cure activities. Attached to the counter-offer was a single email excerpt, just enough to demonstrate the stakes without revealing our full hand. Campbell's response arrived within hours. He requested a face-to-face meeting. We convened in Robert's conference room, its glass walls overlooking the Olympic Mountains. I arrived early, reviewing our terms. Non-negotiable settlement in exchange for my silence and release from marital liability. When Chloe and Campbell entered, her shoulders sagged. She refused to meet my eyes. Hughes spoke first, voice oily with practiced courtesy. "We appreciate your willingness to negotiate." Robert slid our proposal across the table. "Terms are final," he said. Campbell's polished veneer faltered. "This is inadequate. My client deserves half of everything." Chloe finally glanced up, fear and anger battling behind her eyes. "You're blackmailing me," she spat. I leaned forward, voice calm. "I'm protecting myself. Federal prosecutors will find this evidence highly interesting." Robert produced a folder of printed emails. Campbell recoiled as he read them. "These are private communications." Campbell objected. "They're evidence of corporate espionage." Robert corrected. "Which, I'm sure, federal authorities would like to review." Chloe's composure cracked. Campbell leaned in, whispering urgently. She shook her head, tears pooling in her gaze. After a tense silence, Campbell faced us again. "We need to caucus." They left the room. Robert offered me a wry smile. "Holding up well? This isn't how I imagined it ending," I admitted. 20 minutes later, they returned. Campbell's shoulders drooped. "My client will accept your terms. With one stipulation. You agree not to share this evidence with Nova Cure leadership or any law enforcement." Robert exchanged a glance with me. I met Chloe's eye, once the center of my world, now a reflection of betrayal. I nodded. "Agreed, provided she signs today and the divorce is finalized promptly." Campbell exhaled and retrieved the documents Robert produced. 2 hours later, Chloe had signed away her claims to the trust, accepted the $50 payment, and bound us both to silence. She relinquished the townhouse keys, waived alimony, and agreed to no further contact. As she rose to leave, Chloe paused in the doorway. Her voice cracked. "Was any of it real for you?" "All of it was real for me," I replied quietly. She turned and walked away, shoulders hunched against the Seattle rain. Robert shook my hand, offering a heartfelt congratulations. In 90 days, I would be officially single. As I gathered my coat, he asked, "What about Adrian Maddox?" I paused, looking out at the gray sky. "Not my concern," I said, but his name still lingered in my mind, an unfinished transaction in the ledger of my life. I watched Robert Langston's expression shift as I placed the thumb drive on his polished mahogany desk. The late afternoon sun filtered through the Venetian blinds of his downtown Seattle office, casting striped shadows across the folders and legal briefs stacked neatly at the corner. "What are you thinking?" I asked, voice low. That Nova Cure Solutions deserves to know what kind of man they have running their regional operations. I tapped the drive lightly. "Even if Chloe," I hesitated, then corrected myself. "Even if Chloe is granted immunity, they should be warned." Robert leaned back in his leather chair, fingertips steepled beneath his chin. His graying temples caught the light. "Technically, our agreement only prevents you from reporting these findings under your own name," he said. "Anonymous tips aren't covered." His words hung in the air like a second verdict. I felt my pulse quicken. Justice, I reminded myself, wasn't about spite. It was about integrity. That evening, in the quiet sanctuary of my Bellevue townhouse, I set up a new, untraceable email account. My study smelled faintly of sandalwood from the diffuser in the corner, and the only sound was the gentle hum of my desktop tower. I downloaded the thumb drive's contents into an encrypted folder. Email threads between Adrian Maddox and Chloe Sinclair. Timestamps spanning the past 14 months. Attachments detailing product pipelines and confidential research files. With meticulous care, I curated the evidence. Every forwarded message exposed Adrian's pattern of manipulation, promised promotions, detailed instructions to extract proprietary data, without explicitly incriminating Chloe. I drafted a concise cover letter addressed to Novacure's board of directors. Its tone sober and factual. "Please review the enclosed documentation regarding serious breaches of corporate ethics and potential industrial espionage within your organization." I sent the email to the CEO, the compliance department, and each board member. Then, with a few keystrokes, I permanently deleted the account and emptied the trash folder. Even my router logs would show no trace of the addresses I contacted. 3 days later, the Seattle Business Journal's headline caught my eye as I poured my morning espresso. "Senior Executive Resigns Amid Internal Investigation." Seattle Business Journal, March 12. I barely needed to read the subtitle to know who it meant. Adrian Maddox was gone. No official statement beyond personal reasons had been issued, but word of an anonymous tip to the board had reached the journal's investigative desk. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. A single incoming text from Chloe. "I know it was you." I stared at the message, thumb hovering over the screen. My first instinct was to fire back a retort, but I resisted. Some equations balance themselves without interference. I watched the message timestamp fade from bold to read as I set the phone aside. Silent. 6 weeks later, I sat in Robert's conference room again, signing the final divorce decree. The legal pads before me bore my signature in crisp, deliberate strokes. Across from me, Robert slid a letter-sized envelope toward my elbow. "She found new employment," he said quietly. "Entry-level position at Crescent Pharmaceuticals, out in Scottsdale." I frowned as I tore the seal. Chloe's new contract stipulated a base salary less than half of her previous earnings, no bonus potential, and an obligatory 3-year term on the sales floor. No corner office, no guaranteed commissions, a steep fall from Novacure's executive retreats. Robert watched my reaction. She had to sell her car just to cover first-month rent. He noted, $50,000 won't sustain her long at the spending rate she was accustomed to. I felt no triumph, only a muted acknowledgement that actions and consequences are inexorable forces. That same afternoon, a courier delivered a heavy envelope from Nova Cure Solutions. I recognized Jessica Harlow's scrawl on the return label. Inside was a letter on corporate stationery. "Dear Mr. Trent, In light of recent developments and in appreciation of your discretion and expertise, Nova Cure Solutions would like to offer you a consulting role within our newly formed Financial Compliance Division. We believe your proven integrity and strategic acumen will be invaluable during this period of restructuring. Warm regards, Jessica Harlow, Director, Human Resources. A handwritten postscript read, "Justice comes in unexpected forms." My heart lifted at the unexpected vindication. I called Jessica the next morning to accept. 2 months after the divorce was final, I opened an email from Lena Parker, Chloe's former confidant. "Elias, I thought you should know, Chloe and Adrian have split up. He never delivered on any of his promises. She's scraped by but too proud to admit it. She asked about you, whether you've moved on. Take care, Lena." I closed the message without replying. My sense of justice had never centered on Chloe's downfall or preserving my own financial security. It was in the quiet restoration of truth. The ledger of lies had been balanced. 1 year after Chloe's late-night call from the sales conference in Miami, I stood in the foyer of my new home in Clyde Hill, Washington. A modest craftsman-style house half the size of our old townhouse but entirely mine. Through the front window, I glimpsed the snow-capped Olympic mountains shimmering under a pearly sky. My phone buzzed with a text from Catherine Morgan, the corporate attorney I'd met through Novacure's legal affairs team. "Dinner tonight? 7 p.m. Blue Heron Bistro?" Our third date. And this time I felt anticipation rather than apprehension. I adjusted my tie in the hallway mirror, noting the faint lines of gray at my temples, badges of lessons learned. At the bistro's candlelit corner table, we spoke of hikes through Mount Rainier's wildflower meadows, of emerging trends in regulatory frameworks, of books that had shaped our philosophies. Catherine's laughter was genuine, unburdened by artifice. She listened with the same curiosity that had once drawn me to spreadsheets and data models, but with a warmth Chloe had never shown. I hadn't heard from Chloe in months. Through mutual professional contacts I learned she'd left the pharmaceutical industry entirely, taking an adjunct position teaching business ethics at Pima Community College in Tucson. A simpler life than the one she'd once envisioned, but perhaps a more honest one. As I made my way back to my car later that night, I reflected on how that single call from Miami had seemed catastrophic at the time, but ultimately became the catalyst for my own rebirth. Weeks later, I signed the final paperwork to transform the Trent Family Trust into an endowed scholarship fund. The gift would support students pursuing certifications in financial ethics, those who aspired to blend quantitative rigor with moral clarity. What Chloe had tried to strip away now served a higher purpose, converting betrayal into opportunity. The next morning, I drove across the Evergreen Point floating bridge, the Puget Sound's waters rippling beneath me. The Olympics loomed ahead, silent sentinels against the pale dawn. In the mirror, I caught my own calm reflection. I had been right about the numbers all along. But more importantly, I had finally solved the human equation: trust, respect, and integrity outweigh any balance sheet.